Welcome to the American Citizens Abroad podcast. I'm Michelle, and today I'm chatting with Elizabeth, the Chief Operations Officer with TCK Training. Welcome, Elizabeth. Thanks for chatting with us today.
You're so welcome. I am so glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Could you introduce our listeners to TCK Training and what your organization does?
TCK Training works in empowering, equipping, and encouraging both the caregivers and the parents of TCKs or third culture kids in order to help them care really well for these TCKs. Globally, mobile children have such a unique childhood that they have some unique care considerations. And so it's TCK Training's work to empower and equip the people who are caring for them with really rich resources to be able to strategically target these challenge areas in such a way that we can apply preventive care principles and help our TCKs have thriving childhoods.
TCK Training offers comprehensive programs for parents, from those who are preparing to leave, to those who are already abroad, to those who have returned to their home country. Could you dive into these programs, giving us an idea of what's included and the benefits of them?
Yes. Starting with before parents even leave to go abroad, we have a pre-field transition training. In this program, which is ideally going to start about 6 months before a family departs for the field, we'll sit down with the family, we'll talk about how they can leave well, and we'll give them tools for preparing for this upcoming transition. We'll have another coaching session as well right before they leave, just to follow up with them and help prepare them for the upcoming change that is going to be happening in their children's lives. Transition is really all about preparation. And when you have somebody who's helping you through that, it helps streamline that to make it as easy as possible for everyone involved. After our pre-field transition trainings, we often recommend that families take family care packages. And our family care packages are designed in such a way where you have a care specialist whose only concern is on the well-being of your children. And so often when expats are on the field, they have mentors or supervisors speaking into their life, thinking about productivity or success. And so instead, this is somebody who primarily cares about the children above all else. So the family care packages look like us checking in every month or every other month to see how things have been going, to see what upcoming things are happening, and to sit down to empower the parents with rich resources to be able to help their kids thrive through every stage of their year. And then the final thing that we like to equip parents with is a debrief. In our debrief, we sit down with the whole family. We're focused on the kids, but we have components for the whole family and we have spaces just to talk with the parents about what's going on. And when we sit down with them, we can do a full family timeline, a full debrief where we think about everything that has happened in the child's life, focusing in particular on those hard things, because what we have found is that it's a lack of grief processing that's really become problematic for TCKs, especially as they enter into adulthood. Going through all of these different elements in the debrief and helping them raise their emotional vocabulary, get a firmer grasp on their identity, lay out their grief tower timeline, and start grief processing. These elements, the pre-field training, the family care package, and the debrief, are part of what TCK Training envisions as this comprehensive care for families on the field.
Your robust offerings also include packages for care providers of all kinds, including a care specialist membership, certifications, and faith-based curriculum. Could you speak about these?
The amount of care that TCK Training hopes to provide isn't something that can only be provided in-house. So in order to provide care for as many TCKs as we want to reach, training caregivers to do that is an essential part of our model. Some of that involves our workshops where we cover a bunch of different, really specific care principles for TCKs. And our caregivers membership includes all of those workshops as well as exclusive content and group training for the purpose of really pouring into caregivers so that they are equipped to be able to care with excellence for the TCKs they support. To that same end, we have 2 different certifications. One is a pathway certification. And so if someone is interested in getting into the TCK care field, the pathway certification is everything that they need to know in order to be able to do that well in an organizational context. And then we also have a debrief certification training where we teach care specialists on how to facilitate debriefs for the TCKs that they support. This debrief helps us extend our sphere of influence by being able to train others to do this work as well. We have a faith-based curriculum, and our leadership comes from a faith background. But we've been really intentional about developing all of our materials on a research basis so that they are applicable to even people who are not from a faith-based background. Our faith-based curriculum is focused in on that, but our other debriefs and certifications have a wider framework where we're focusing on the research more than the faith-based element.
Before we go into your recent white paper, could you talk about the benefits of growing up overseas?
There are so many rich benefits in being able to grow up overseas, and I am so thrilled that I'm able to provide my own children with this childhood. Through growing up overseas, we're able to see so many different cultures and so many different approaches to all elements of life, from how people eat, to how people travel, to how people socialize. The wide range of experiences gives TCKs this really unique ability to be compassionate for different people and where they've come from, to think outside of the box because they've seen so many different ways to do things. It makes them open-minded and have greater generosity just because of the wealth of experiences that they've had with this global worldview.
Could you explain to our listeners what the purpose of your 2021 survey was trying to learn from the more than 2,000 third culture kids surveyed, and what the ACE scores mean?
We had long since theorized that third culture kids are more susceptible to developmental traumas than monoculturals are. We had anecdotally experienced that in the years that we have worked with TCKs. But what we felt compelled to do was support that with really solid research. And so we used this framework of the ACE scores. Now, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there are 10 adverse childhood experiences that can make up the ACE score. ACE scores have had a lot of research done into them. And so we thought this is going to be a really fantastic framework to build up our own research on, because we already know that ACE scores have been widely researched. So the ACE scores cover different kinds of abuse, that is emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, different kinds of neglect, and that is emotional and material neglect, and 5 different household dysfunctions, that is divorce, domestic violence, substance abuse, incarceration, or untreated mental illness of someone in the home. And so if there's the presence of 4 or more of these ACE scores, that's considered a high ACE score. And what the research has shown is that that is linked to higher mental health struggles in the future. And so what we wanted to do in this survey was to really know and have an answer to the question, do globally mobile children have higher ACE scores than their monocultural peers? Now, the CDC Kaiser had done a survey on Americans, over 17,000 Americans, and what their ACE scores were. So we used the same questions of their survey in our survey so that we could have comparable data. And we surveyed over 2,000 third culture kids, and then we cleaned up the data. And when we cleaned out the ones that seemed less than reliable, or people had only filled out a fraction of the survey, those kinds of results, we ended up with 1,904 survey results. And so based off of those, we were able to find out the data from our research.
I saw from your infographic that your research shows that third culture kids are more susceptible to mental health struggles than previously thought, and that those who moved quite frequently had higher ACE scores. Could you expand on these findings?
What we found was that 1 out of 5 third culture kids had struggled from a high ACE score, which is a higher rate than the CDC Kaiser's monocultural individuals. The high ACE score means that it is more likely that people would suffer from mental health struggles in the future. We also found that those who had high mobility had an even higher probability of having a high ACE score. And so 1 out of 3 TCKs with high mobility were likely to have a higher ACE score. What this means to us is that quantifiably, TCKs are at higher risk than other children and need really intentional preventive care.
What do these findings mean for parents who move internationally often? What can they do to minimize the negative long-term impact of such moves?
What we hope that parents would take away from these numbers is that when we have such a great opportunity for our kids, we need to recognize that great reward comes from great risk. And as we are thinking about the risk that we're embarking on, that we can be strategic in the preventive care strategies that we use to help prevent those risks from having a harmful impact. These things can look like the PIECES. And so PIECES, again, these have been studied in conjunction with the ACEs, are positive childhood experiences. And there's a list of 7 different positive childhood experiences that parents can work on implementing in a really strategic way. TCK Training has a free mini-series on the positive childhood experiences that go through each one of them in easy ways that they can be implemented. Positive childhood experiences aren't hard, but it's easy to drop, especially in high mobility families. They're things like having friends. Well, having friends is easy enough as long as we're intentional about it. But when we're constantly moving, it can be hard to be intentional about those things. And so our free mini series is just a way to equip parents with some of those strategies to be able to provide preventive care to minimize that long-term potential negative impact of high mobility.
I saw on your blog, in regards to your research findings, there are separate posts centering around international school students, another for business families, another for missionary kids, another for children of educators and humanitarian workers, and another for military kids. Do you find that the challenges vary for these kids depending upon why their families are living abroad?
We have noticed a difference in the ACE scores and which demographics were more susceptible to which kinds of developmental traumas. There's a lot of differences in the reason why children are overseas and where they end up when they're abroad. So military kids are most often going to be living on a military base, whereas missionary kids are very often living in developing countries. The different support systems that the different families have, the different living situations that those families are more likely to end up in, can create themes where we see general differences depending on their reason for living abroad.
I fear that most think of TCKs as children only. Could you explain just who is an adult TCK?
An adult TCK is anyone who lived as a third culture kid when they were younger. We're thinking about third culture kids as people who have spent a significant amount of time living outside of their passport country. And that would be a traditional TCK. There's a lot of people who really have felt that they were a domestic TCK or they relate to the TCK culture for various reasons. But in our definition at TCK Training, we're thinking about people who have lived outside of their passport country for a significant period of time with the intent to repatriate. An adult TCK is somebody who had that childhood experience but is now over 18, is now trying to function as an adult with a really unique childhood.
Are there any benefits of being an adult TCK? What challenges do adult TCKs face?
There are so many benefits to being an adult TCK, and it comes out of those same benefits of growing up overseas, right? They just brought those experiences with them into adulthood. We see this compassion, this ability to understand where different people are coming from because they have seen more than one way of thinking about a thing. They've seen more than one way of solving a problem. Adult TCKs generally can be open-minded. They have a really broad worldview because of the wealth of experiences and perspectives they've brought with them in their formative years. And they're also really out-of-the-box thinkers. But what we have found is that adult TCKs often face a lot of challenges. And these challenges can be based around their identity. Who am I? Where did I come from? And where do I belong now? These challenges can be linked to a lot of unresolved grief. And sometimes that unresolved grief actually is a deterrent to some of the benefits that they would have received as an adult TCK. The ability to be compassionate is minimized when they're still trying to wrestle and heal from their own unprocessed grief. Those are some of the challenges that we see as adult TCKs are really things that have been left unprocessed and they're still carrying with them as baggage from their childhood.
TCK training offers several resources for adult TCKs. Could you speak about these?
Our biggest resource is unstacking sessions. And so unstacking sessions are designed to help adult TCKs think through their third culture childhood and think about the blocks that may have stacked up throughout their childhood, empower them to be able to process those blocks, and also think through the strengths that they have earned throughout their childhood that they are able to maximize on now as adults. So those are our unstacking sessions, which are our most popular option. We also have groups, including group unstacking sessions, and we have workshops that are specifically designed for adult TCKs. So workshops on identity and belonging or romantic relationships. Is it okay to date somebody who wasn't a TCK themselves? And how do you know when you're supposed to stick through and wrestle through hard things that are happening in the relationship? Or is your wanting to leave a flight of fancy because you left a lot as a TCK? Just different things that TCKs wrestle with because of their unique circumstances of their childhood.
Do you have any events or any TCK training news you'd like to share?
Around the end of November, the beginning of December, we're planning on releasing our second white paper. So our survey results had a lot of numbers that came out that we wanted to get people right away about the ACE scores. And so we provided that in our first white paper. Our second white paper is doing a deeper dive into the ACE scores and how those things impact children. And that one will be out in a couple months. The other thing that TCK training is about to debut is our new membership program. We are going to start in full force at the beginning of the year in January, but this will give parents and caregivers access to our workshops and exclusive content and group training. We have one track for caregivers and we have another track for parents. And this is just a huge wealth of resources that are available on our new platform. And through the end of the year, we are offering 15% off of the first subscription with the coupon code JOINNOW.
Thanks for joining us today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
The American Citizens Abroad podcast is a monthly podcast that is published the second Tuesday of each month. It is edited and produced by me, Michelle, and is a product of American Citizens Abroad. You can find us on Twitter at ACA_podcast, on Facebook at American Citizens Abroad Podcast, or you can email us at podcast@americansabroad.org. Remember, give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts so other Americans living abroad can find us.